Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for making time today to join us for the Getting Started with GRESB webinar, Insights from New Participants. My name is Reid Morgan. I'm a Member Relations Manager here at GRESB, based here in the US, in Denver, actually. And we've got a great panel of folks lined up to discuss their experience with joining GRESB and what the first few years were like. So let me run through our quick little agenda. Introduce who our speakers are, and we'll kick this thing off. We've got about a half hour here scheduled for this discussion. So first off, we're going to hear from my counterpart, Alex Steele. He's our Member Relations Manager based over in London. And he's going to walk us through just a quick GRESB 101. So kind of orient us, get us set up here with understanding some of the basic components, how GRESB works, some insights into participation, who's participating, how the benchmark is growing year over year, some of that kind of introductory information. And then we're going to jump into three different perspectives from three different participant members who have had their own experiences over the past few years in getting on board with GRESB, getting going with GRESB, and really kind of getting that flywheel spinning. So some how-tos, some guidance from them, and some good takeaways on kind of what they wish they had known, or what they would do differently, or what they have learned over the past few years. We'll end with some Q&A, just a few minutes to address some questions as they come up. You're welcome to place those in the chat. Alex and I will jump back on there at the end and try to address as many of those as we can. If we can't address questions in the time frame that we have here, we'll get back to you with specific responses afterwards. So without further ado, let me introduce our speakers, after which I will then hand it over to Alex to get us going. So first off, I'd like to introduce to you Cassandra McFadden, the Global Head of Sustainability for Cortland, a vertically integrated multifamily investment, development, and management firm headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. She joined Cortland in November 2022, continuing her career focus on progressing multifamily sustainability. Prior to Cortland, Cassandra held positions including Vice President of Sustainability at Bozzuto and Director of Energy Management at Avalon Bay Communities. Her responsibilities have ranged from utilities data streamlining and utilities billing management to corporate ESG reporting. She's a Fitwel ambassador and has spoken on topics including science-based targets, solar development, and project incentives stemming from the Inflation Reduction Act. Cassandra earned a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and Environmental Studies from Case Western Reserve University and a Master's of Science in Energy Policy and Climate from Johns Hopkins University. Next, we have David Natt, Senior Vice President of Asset Management at Avaneth Capital Management. He's responsible for building out Avaneth's ESG platform. Mr. Natt joined Avaneth in May of 2019, has a long-established career in the commercial real estate industry. After obtaining an MBA in finance from NYU Stern School of Business, David worked for Citibank Realty Advisors, where he was responsible for acquiring value-add multifamily properties throughout the U.S. After leaving Citibank, David worked for Tishman Speyer Properties, where he was responsible for acquiring and developing commercial office properties located in the Washington, D.C. and New York City markets. And after Tishman, David spent 15 years at TIAA CREF, where he had several responsibilities, including working on the foreign acquisitions team, real estate private equity team, and the multifamily asset management team. David is very familiar with multifamily properties that range from core to value add, including garden, mid, and high-rise property types. David's career is founded on a BS in accounting from Drexel University. And third, we have Kelsey Cummings, a client services senior analyst for Magnolia Capital, a nationally focused real estate investor based in Chicago. In her position, Ms. Cummings supports all fundraising efforts, reporting efforts, as well as investor requests. She also heads Magnolia's ESG team. And prior to joining Magnolia, Ms. Cummings worked for KPMG on their economic and valuation services team. And she attended the University of Notre Dame, where she earned her Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering. So I'm very excited for you to get to hear from these three amazing individuals with great stories and lessons to share with everybody on how they approach GRESB, how they've continued to grow in the GRESB reporting cycle, and some guidance for all of us. Let me hand it over to Alex. He's going to walk us through a little bit of GRESB 101, and then we'll jump straight into the interviews with our panelists. Alex?
Thank you so much, Reid. Greetings from everyone to everyone here from London, other side of the pond. So in the short run through, I'm going to introduce GRESB. I'm going to outline the key elements of involvement and also look at trends, some of the perceived challenges, and the GRESB toolkit. So let's get going. So it's been a great year. It's been an increasing year of participation. GRESB has seen over 2,000 participants in 2023, over 100 new entities from Americas, and that represents a total real asset value of $8.6 trillion. So 14 years of continued growth, indicating a long-standing track record. And GRESB isn't just suitable for largest fund managers and listed companies, it's also suitable for smaller managers. Over 50% of participating funds have a GAV of $1 trillion or lower. So in terms of what is GRESB, let's unpack that. GRESB is and does assess and benchmark ESG performance of real assets, providing standardized and validated data to capital markets, both through the real estate assessment and infrastructure. Portfolios who participate in the annual GRESB assessment, we provide tools that help them map their own ESG program against this globally defined framework, and help them discover where they are on their ESG journey and topics against peers, as well as the entire GRESB universe. And GRESB is the ESG language for real estate. It's well recognized and globally applicable. We cooperate with globally recognized industry partners, as you can see here on the slide, and we incorporate this within the assessment. So what are the benefits? Why should you get involved? Well, learning the assessment. Through participation, this will allow comprehension of the assessment and the various constituent elements. Being involved will allow you to progress along the learning curve sooner, and you'll hit the streamlined submissions in readiness for the increasing minimum requirements that are coming down the road. Secondly, benchmarking. It provides a deeper understanding of how your program compares against not only your peers, but also the wider real estate sector, and insights into leading best practices. It provides a pathway forward that facilitates the development of tailored action plans for yourself, for your company as an investment manager. And finally, it's a tool for communicating to your investors and other stakeholders to do so in a consistent way, not only for a single year, but year upon year. Just move to the next slide. So we do realize there are some perceived challenges in getting involved. So let's look at these in more detail. Firstly, scoring. You may be apprehensive about your first year score, it being lower than you'd like. We do see low scores in the first year, and this is to be expected. That's not to say you can't score highly. We actually saw 45% of participants in 2022 achieve a 4 or 5-star Green Star rating. We do see an average of 23% scoring improvement between year 1 and year 2. And this is driven by enhanced assessment acumen and comprehension, as well as a change between years being a fantastic opportunity to showcase your progress. In year 2, we see improvements across all component parts of the assessment. That's management, performance for the standing investment, and management and development for the development benchmark. Secondly, the fund strategy. Move on to the next one. The fund strategy and property type suitability. So as you can see from the pie chart on the right, over 75% of first year participants manage non-office property. A lot of the perspective is that GRESB is more suitable for office, but actually this shows a lot of our participants have non-office properties. Also is appropriate for different fund strategies. Over a quarter of participants actually have value add or opportunistic funds. And then also non-core office represents over 90% of first year participant portfolios. Resourcing. The most common pushback that we hear investors receive from managers regarding GRESB participation is tied to resource constraints. And we know there's lots of different benchmarks and lots of different reporting elements to do in ESG. However, the majority of investors feel that they receive enough support from GRESB to participate. So here at GRESB, we provide onboarding, including entity setup. We can do it together. A training platform, which has recently been enhanced and is modular, as well as self-paced. We have a dedicated account manager, such as me and Reid, who you can reach out to directly. We have a member success team, which is for technical queries, analysts to guide you through. We also have a partner network, which are expert consultants and industry bodies. And also you can focus on specific components and indicators in a phased approach. For example, in year 1, more focus on the management component, for example, and in year 2, more focus on the performance component. Let's look at some investor comments. So what do investors really think? So one asset manager commented, we used to and still get the question from managers a lot, where should we start reporting? We've told them, start with GRESB if you can, because that's the gold standard in the REIT industry. An index provider stated transparency. It's hard for boards and management teams to effectively manage what they don't measure. So what we as investors are really looking for is transparency. A pension fund confirmed it's not just comparability, it is also the trend line that matters for newly reporting managers, providing a multi-year lens. So GRESB offer a toolkit to streamline that success. I'll run through these fairly quickly, but you can see them in the more detail in the slide pack we issue. 82% of first-year participants take advantage of what we call the grace period, which is 1 year where scores are kept private. And this will give you an opportunity to develop assessment familiarity, as well as get your data ready for subsequent years of reporting. Also allows you to determine areas of strength and opportunity, both short-term and long-term. Okay, if we look on the response check, pre-submission, that's April to June. We have a high-level check of assessment responses, which we offer. This also allows you to understand to a greater level areas of validation error that could occur. Certain scoring enhancements, we see an improvement in scoring for first year standing investment, second year, as well as the development benchmark, as you can see in the table. We also offer results review, and this is post-submission, October to December, deep diving into indicators, highlighting opportunities, both short-term and long-term, and the detailed insight that is delivered aids strategic planning and also your decision-making to fast-track the scoring improvement. So what are the takeaways? I'd say not undertaking the assessment means a score of 0. You're not taking part, you're not participating, it's a 0. So a low first-year score actually provides an excellent launch pad to go from. As a manager, GRESB can be used to demonstrate significant advancements year on year. Start in 2024, continue in 2025 and beyond. So finally, participation mitigates risk. It provides a lens into what you're doing now and what you need to do tomorrow. Risks will compound over time and grow if action is delayed to future years when there is going to be other mandatory disclosures and legislative disclosures coming down the road. Thanks for listening, and I'll now hand you back to Reid, who will take you through the rest of the session.
Great, thank you, Alex. Super helpful. Nice to get a good overview of not just how GRESB works, but why, and start to address some of those kind of first-year concerns and first-year fears. We understand there's a lot of unknowns, and so someone who may be stepping into this from scratch may be very curious about, well, how do I address some of these things? So wonderful. All right, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Cassandra McFadden. I am so happy you're here. Thanks, Cass. It's great to have you. Appreciate you making time.
Yeah, thank you, Reid, and thank you to GRESB for having me today.
Awesome. Well, let's jump into the first question. I'd love for you to share a little bit about what motivated you to get involved with GRESB in the first place at Cortland, and when you thought, okay, let's do this, we're going to do this. Was there a time delay, or were you like, let's dive in? What was that kind of getting started process for you?
Yeah, so diving in, I started at Cortland last November. By that time, Cortland had actually reported twice, one sort of a blind reporting period and then continuing annually with the reporting. And in leading sustainability and now diving into what we're doing with ESG, I really found that Cortland understood that this global assessment was a way for investors to really see, right, what the performance is for ESG and sustainability. So that was really, I have to credit those who were with the organization prior to my arrival for getting started. But within the first year, it was, sort of, okay, how do we do this? How do we put this together? And what kind of internal competency and buy-in do we need to get started? So for the very first year, as Alex had kind of mentioned, the score was low, as would be expected when you're getting started. But year over year, GRESB was used as a guide for improvement, at least to understand some level of a North Star, right, as to how you should effectively put a program together and look to engage internal stakeholders to improve annually. So now that we are in our third year of reporting, we just reported this year. What we do is we consistently do a gap analysis to really understand what the opportunities are. And we don't underestimate that it's not just about reporting. That's the output, what we get to say at the end of the year for the reporting cycle, but it's really about what we're doing internally across departments and different projects to improve. Some areas you may kind of tap out early, right, related to management and other things where you say, okay, we have our policies set and we have our governance structure. But in terms of actually, sort of reducing emissions and creating strategies around those types of things, that's where we really see the opportunity to improve. So it's very much an evolution at Cortland.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great. Great. I'm curious. So we had talked a little bit about this earlier, how given that GRESB is a rear facing reporting framework, right? You're looking at last year's data. You're kind of simultaneously, gathering this information about last year while also making changes in the current year. So you've got these two things happening at the same time, right? So you're using the framework to learn and then also implementing it actively. How do you balance that, kind of looking backwards to report on last year while also getting changes happening in the current year so that next year, when you report, you have different things to say?
Yeah, there are some foundational pieces that are important. Like, I kind of mentioned policies, governance, having internal buy-in and communication, having an internal roadmap. I think that's a great place to start or get to with your organization. Because if the goals are more clearly understood and the why behind each activity is clearly understood, you're able to then plan that within the year. Some things very much can happen on the fly as we do ongoing gap analysis and we say, oh, if this is going to be on the GRESB assessment next year, maybe we feel like we're not really meeting it. We may need a push during this year, but it really comes down to the annual planning, the same way you would do with the rest of your business planning to achieve those goals. And I can't say enough that it's very important for folks to consider having some level of an internal team, because you're going to need the energy behind all of that communication to really go through the assessment, maybe take a specific section of the GRESB reporting, whether it's related to reporting itself or actual sustainability planning, to communicate what a specific department can do to move the needle there. And that's where we've really found the success, making it relevant to each department and thinking through what each level of stakeholder involvement may look like. In multifamily, we need our directors of operations to be involved. We may need, for residential engagement pieces, we may need more involvement from our community managers. And anytime you do those kinds of things, it's all change management, right? So you want to make sure that you have effective communication all along the way with planning and execution.
Yeah. Sounds like a lot of coordination, a lot of getting the right people at the table, a lot of making sure the right people are involved.
Right.
So I'm thinking about just GRESB as one piece of your strategy, right? You have many elements, many other reporting frameworks, a lot that you're working with. How would you say that the GRESB participation specifically influences or enhances the development of your overall approach at Cortland?
Yeah, I think as we all know, there are a ton of frameworks out there. You really have to select the one that's going to, for me as a practitioner, it's important that it captures all relevant sort of ESG categories of interest to our investors. But the nice thing about GRESB is that it's a tool that also evolves with what's happening in sustainability. And so I think that engagement is really important. And we use the questions and the evolution of the questions in the GRESB framework to really guide the gap analysis and the rest of our strategy. It's not all of it, but that's a big part of it in terms of the framework. It helps us understand, okay, what additional actions do we need to take related to maybe taking some kind of inventory of emissions, or do we need to start thinking about transition planning because questions are coming in GRESB about that? How do we effectively build that into our activities? And then we figure out, if there's a broader gap analysis in terms of, do we need to sign on to another framework that nicely complements what's happening with GRESB to lead our strategy, then we can start to evaluate those areas. But I would say it's a great framework, great guidance. And the nice thing about GRESB being technical in a sense is that it provides a really nice guide for strategy.
Wonderful. All right, I'm going to have one last question before we chat with David. When you think back to your kind of beginning stages with GRESB, as you were getting oriented, learning how to kind of wrap your head around the assessment, if you can think back to that and remember, for those on the call here who are kind of in that position right now, what kind of guidance or wisdom would you share with them that you've learned over the years, thinking back to those early days?
Yeah, I feel like I've kind of peppered this into my other responses, but I would say, prepare yourself for success. So have an internal understanding of, sort of your goals, where you want to go. Make sure that you have, internal capabilities, whether it's through staffing or maybe external capabilities through some level of partnership. It could be with GRESB or another partner to really walk you through the steps of how you can be successful with GRESB. It's really those foundational pieces, understanding where your data is going to flow from. Is it complete? Is it clean? Really your energy consumption data. I think having those foundational pieces and understanding the timing of GRESB, when you're looking to report, when you need to implement activities, all of that will nicely set you up for success in GRESB reporting.
Wonderful. Cass, thank you so much. Great responses. Appreciate your insights. Super valuable.
Thank you so much, Reid.
Great. All right. Now, my pleasure to introduce to you David Natt. David, great to have you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. My pleasure.
So one of the unique things that I want to highlight about your perspective and the Advantage story is that your property type is challenging. It's a there are difficulties around reporting, around data acquisition, around kind of compliance with all these things that GRESB was putting out there, and you've done a really good job. And I want to know how. So tell me a little bit about that property type challenge and how you've gone about kind of being successful in GRESB year over year with that.
Oh, okay. Excellent question. So let me just give you, as a means of background, Advantage Capital, we're a private equity-based company in Irvine, California. We specialize in affordable housing. We are mandated to clear across our portfolio to acquire nationwide affordable. So what does that present? That presents some difficulties for us, particularly from a GRESB standpoint, meaning most of the properties that we purchase are older in nature. They typically are garden style. And to score very highly at GRESB, it's a bit challenging. On top of it, because it's multifamily, as owner and is from a controlling standpoint, I basically control maybe 15, maybe 20, maybe a little bit more % of the property because I can't control our residents. We can kind of influence them to kind of provide some sort of level of understanding and kind of introduce the merits of recycling and all that stuff. But I can't control how they set their thermostat. I can't control what they do with their trash. So it is a bit challenging. But what we have done at Advantage is that we came up with some sort of unique strategies to kind of work around it. So, for example, because we buy older properties, we're somewhat handicapped a little bit from a GRESB scoring standpoint. Now, I know that GRESB is looking into this, and there are going to be hopefully there'll be some changes over the next couple of years because we are certainly advocating for it. But because we buy older properties, most of these properties are not certified. They're not LEED certified because some of this stuff was bought it was built in the 50s or the 60s or the 70s or even the 80s. So it's not LEED certified. In fact, Most of our portfolio is not. I think only less than a handful of our properties are LEED. Some of the recent purchases that we made in New York City and Washington, D.C. are LEED certified. So that's a bit of a challenge for us. But when we started this bit, when we got into the GRESB, we chose to do it for a couple reasons. One, our investors wanted this. Two, is that we have a unique story. Because we're in the we specialize in affordable. We're in the social impact space. So Avanus has been always very, very strong on the social side. So if you look at ESG, we're very strong in S. We're very strong in G because it's affordable. We have a very strong compliance group, and we have a very strong set of policies and procedures in place. So when we embarked on creating our ESG platform back in 2020, we had certain goals in place. One of our goals was to create a platform where the rest of the industry will kind of look for us as a leader in this space. Within the affordable space, we are a leader, in my opinion, but particularly with our ownership. We are advocating with either Fannie Mae, with HUD, and elsewhere on the Hill. So what we decided to do is that when we started this, is that we took a look at ourselves, what are our immediate goals, and then we decided we can't really do this on our own internally. So we reached out among the consultants, and with my background working at TI-CREF, I worked with a couple consultants in the past. So I actually conducted an RFP process, and through there I kind of learned a little bit more about my company because I was still relatively new at Avanith. And so we interviewed a number of ESG consulting companies. Some were vertical integrated, others were basically just providing more of the data mechanics behind it. And we decided a company that kind of matched us. And so we ended up hiring a wonderful company out of Northern Virginia, Retech Advisors, and we've been working with them very, very closely. But as we approached this, we looked at this thing in sort of like a roadmap of a very strategic standpoint. So we hired the consultant. The consultant did gap analysis on our company, what we're strong at, what we're weak at. Then we started putting in some immediate goals. With ESG, as Cassandra has mentioned in the prior interview, it starts and ends with the data. You need to have really clean data, and you need to be able to flow all the data into Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And so we've been very successful in that. And so in a very short period of time, we actually have data coverage, at least on the water, over 90%. And so for whole building data for electric and gas, currently right now we're around 65%. And if you throw in some sort of estimates, because we have some sort of gaps on a couple months here or there, we're well over 90%. So that's really strong data that we're able to kind of leverage and basically build upon our performance. So what we've done in the past is that over the past 2 years, we quickly have maximized all of our points on management performance. And so now we're pivoting towards how do we improve performance at the property level.
Yeah, David, that's awesome. Love that you kind of took us through that journey of how you started at the beginning, what it looked like to find some additional resources to help you kind of go that path. And to what you said earlier, there are challenges in the assessment for any given property, so whether it's data acquisition or certifications, and hitting those challenges head on with saying, okay, what can we do in this space? I think that I see that as being a really effective approach that Avanith has taken to, increase the scoring, make strides year over year, where you're finding the areas that you really can dive in and do, and make some big steps with. Let me go straight to our piece of advice question, because I think I'd love for folks to hear, given the journey that you've been on with GRESB and your experience over the years, what can you provide to someone kind of new on this journey that would help encourage that first step to get into GRESB?
Yep. I would just understand what your goals are. Where do you want to be, both in the short, near, as well as a long-term basis? At Avanith, we quickly adopted some of the policies that were created from the Paris Accord. That's our end goal, to come up with a standard. So anyone that's basically embarking on the GRESB, learn first what your goals are. 2 is trying to figure out how you want to implement that and look at your internal resources. Do you have it in place, or do you need to outsource? And then from there, I would really spend some time figuring out what, because there's a lot of consultants out there, figure out what consulting company kind of matches not only your strengths and your weaknesses of your company, but as well as your culture of your company. And I think that's really, really important to understand.
Yeah, that's awesome, David. Thank you so much. Appreciate your insights. This has been really, really helpful. Thanks for sharing.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Kelsey, thank you so much for joining us today. So good to have you.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be speaking with you today.
Well, let's jump right in. We're here to talk about Magnolia Capital's experience with GRESB, particularly in the first kind of onboarding, getting started. So we'll start bigger and then kind of dive into a little more specific questions. But first off, as far as your experience with the GRESB assessment, how has it benefited your company? How have you seen it be a good thing for Magnolia Capital?
Yeah, great question. I think it's really helped us ask ourselves questions that we hadn't before, and therefore helped us identify opportunities for improvement. We have a great ESG platform in place, but there are certain questions, certain aspects throughout the whole assessment that we're like, oh, we should really focus on this, or we should, work to improve upon this, or implement this, or document it more. So it's great for the ideas, and it's not just the property level too. It's throughout the whole company, whether it's, it's the way we interact with our third-party vendors, or it's our employee engagement surveys, the senior level ESG practices. So it was great to identify these opportunities through the assessment.
Yeah, that's great. Sometimes I hear people talk about GRESB as a framework that kind of, when you first take a look at it, there's almost like a gap analysis that kind of happens of, oh, we're doing this and we're not doing this, and you get insights into kind of what the expectation is, and you can build around that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we definitely resonate with that.
Great. So let's talk specifically about Magnolia Capital's approach. So you guys decided to strategically focus on the management component for the first year and not submit the performance component until the second year. So walk me through that process, how you kind of decided to do that, and then how that was beneficial, or how that what your experience was with that.
Yeah. I really am very happy with that strategy that we took. We're a smaller company. Magnolia Capital is an investment manager. We have 50 to 60 people at corporate, and we have a third party. We have our own property management company, so we're vertically integrated. And with about 100 to 120 site level employees. So we don't have a specific designated ESG team that a lot of bigger firms do. I had our ESG, but I'm also our client services, investor relations, senior analyst. So, my entire time is not devoted to ESG. So we wanted to see if the GRESB assessment was doable, and if we could continue it year over year, which we for sure can, but we just didn't know what we were getting into. So by completing the management portion for the first year, it really helped us swallow what the reporting looked like. And then use that for year 2 as well.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of people are in that position too, where they wear a lot of hats like you do. This is a piece of their job. And when you look at GRESB, you go, how much effort is this going to take? How much time do I need to dedicate to this? And so there can certainly be some hesitancy there, but it sounds like that was something that, given the way that you kind of broke it out over those 2 years, was a lot more digestible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. So when you got into it, right, we kind of already mentioned this, you don't know what you don't know going into it. But when you really kind of, had your first cycle, got into your second cycle, what did you find both in year 1 and year 2? What did you find that took you longer than you thought it was going to take you?
So same answer for both years. It was definitely data collection, but it was different for each year. So first year, we just completed the management portion. And that was a lot of meeting with my colleagues, understanding what the right response would be, or, just like how we can think about certain questions, as well as the supporting documentation, in order to develop, really thoughtful responses. So we had that first year, it was great though, because we could use that a lot of those responses from year 1 in years 2 assessment for the management portion. And in year 2, we also reported on the property performance. And for this, we engaged a third-party ESG software platform to aggregate all of our utility usage. So that was very helpful. But both years, the data collection, but I know year 3 is going to be much smoother because we've already done it twice.
Yeah. Yeah, and when it comes to that data collection, you really are reaching across the organization, right?
For sure.
All parts. And so
we had, I had to grab, employee engagement survey statistics. Where's our employee handbook? All these line items. I'm like, well, I just need to ask and figure out where it is. And now I have it all aggregated in one place too.
Yeah. Nice. So back to that kind of first year, what do you think you would have liked to have known or taken advantage of that now that would have made a difference in that beginning stages?
Yeah, great question. If I could go back and do it again, I would have used more of the GRESB resources that are available. There's redacted assessments on the website that you can download to really get a feel for what's being asked and start to think about your responses. And I would also start the assessment earlier, even if it's, just keeping track of it outside of the actual assessment on the website. It to give yourself more time allows for more review, more iterations, and to really deliver a quality deliverable. So more time and using more resources to my advantage.
Yeah. And that's a good point. You had mentioned that the portal opens in April and closes in June.
Yeah.
So you have a 3-month window, but you can do a lot of offline work, right?
Yeah,
You can coordinate, you can gather things, you can aggregate, you can get all that kind of set up to go. Putting yourself in a really good position once that portal does.
And also, I don't know if it's just me, but April through June flies by. So, it's great to get yourself in a position that you're ready to, really report.
Absolutely. All right, we're down to our last question. Thank you so much again, Kelsey. This has been awesome. When you are thinking about those who are just getting started, who haven't dipped their toe in yet, what piece of advice would you give now as a GRESB veteran to those folks?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think my biggest piece of advice would be to make it a team effort, so that the assessment doesn't just fall onto one person's shoulders or a few people's shoulders. But I'd really educate your company, and all the stakeholders of not just ESG but GRESB assessment too, just so everyone knows the deliverable and can work towards not only submitting it, but achieving good results in it too. So definitely make it a team effort. It's much more manageable that way.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. GRESB as a team sport. That's such a great perspective. Thank you. All right. Well, this has been great, Kelsey. I really appreciate your time and your perspective. Thanks for sharing your experience.
Yeah, thanks so much, Reid. Appreciate it.
All right, we are at the end of our webinar. I want to say a huge thank you to David, Cass, and Kelsey for taking the time out of your day to share your insights and act as shining lights in guiding those of us who are just checking this out. For the questions, we're running a little low on time, so I'm just going to address just a question or two here really quickly. As I mentioned earlier, you can throw questions in the chat over the next few minutes here, and we will get back to you, maybe just not on this webinar. But one of the questions here is about which consultants to use. And I think, so this is great because David mentioned this, finding a consultant with a good fit who does what you need. And there's a broad spectrum, right? So we've got, like David mentioned, vertical integration, firms that are vertically integrated, firms that focus on policies, firms that focus on data. We have on our website a directory of these consultants and these guides. You can sort by industry, you can sort by location, you can sort by services offered, and that's a really great place to go to kind of find those filters, look for who you're looking for specifically. If it's data collection that you're most interested in, you can go to the data providers and narrow that in. So we work very closely with a lot of partners globally, and we have all their information there on that page. You can also reach out directly to us and ask for some helpful hints of who should I be talking to. This is what I need. This is kind of what I'm looking for, and we're happy to help out with that. So hope to be able to provide some guidance there. So I think I'm going to just jump straight to a thank you and a goodbye. for all the other questions, we'll respond to you as we can. But wonderful to be together for this, and we will have this recorded. We will send this out. We will make sure that you have access to this and can distribute it amongst your team. Keep it for yourself or share with anybody who may be interested. So big thanks again. Appreciate your time. Have a wonderful day.